Welcome back. Today we are tackling Exodus chapter 16. If for some reason I haven't driven you crazy yet, or you hadn't got mad at me because I've conflicted your church doctrines with what Scripture actually says, today is probably the day. This is one of the most controversial things, and one of the things that most of the people that have gotten upset with me were all very seasoned Christians who have been doing this for a really long time. And this upset what they thought was best. And I even had somebody tell me that she didn't like that and wasn't going to do it. And I said, fine, it doesn't hurt me. God said it, not me. I didn't come up with this idea. So today we're going to talk about manna and a little bit about Shabbat. I'm going to split this one into two because the explanation of the Sabbath and manna will take way too long. I think some of you will probably fall asleep trying to figure that whole thing out. So I'm going to break it in two. So we're going to read chapter 16, Complete Jewish Bible. Let's go. They traveled on from Elim, and the whole community of the people of Israel arrived at the Sin desert between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after leaving the land of Egypt. There in the desert, the whole community of the people of Israel grumbled against Moshe and Aaron. The people of Israel said to them, "We wished Adonai had used his own hand to kill us off in Egypt. There we used to sit around the pots with the meat boiling, and we had as much food as we wanted. But you have taken us out into the desert and let this whole assembly starve to death." Adonai said to Moshe, "Here, I will cause bread to rain down from heaven for you. The people are to go out and gather a day's ration every day. By this I will test whether they will observe my Torah or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they have brought in, it will turn out to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." Moshe and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, "This evening you will realize that it has been Adonai who brought you out of Egypt." Basically saying, it wasn't me. This wasn't my idea. uh, what, what are we that you should grumble against us? Moshe added, "What I've said will happen when Adonai gives you meat to eat this evening and your fill of bread tomorrow morning. Adonai has listened to your complaints and grumblings against him. What are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Adonai." And that's what I like to tell people. You can get mad at what I'm saying, but this is what God said, not me. Your argument is with him. So Moshe said to Aaron, "Say to the whole community of Israel, come close into the presence of Adonai, for he has heard your grumblings." As Aaron spoke to the whole community of the people of Israel, they looked toward the desert, and there before them the glory of Adonai appeared in the cloud. And Adonai said to Moshe, "I have heard the grumblings of the people of Israel. Say to them, at dusk you will be eating meat, and in the morning you will have your fill of bread. Then you will realize that I am Adonai your God." That evening quails came up and covered the camp, while in the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the dew had evaporated, there on the surface of the desert was a fine flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they asked each other, "Manhu, what is this?" That's what manna means is, what is this? Because they didn't know what it was. Moshe answered them, "It is the bread which Adonai has given you to eat. Here is what Adonai has ordered each man to gather according to his appetite. Each is to take an omer, basically 2 quarts, per person for everyone in his tent." The people of Israel did this. Some gathered more, some less. But when they put it in an omer measure, whoever had gathered much had no excess, and whoever had gathered little had no shortage. Nevertheless, each person had gathered according to his appetite. Moshe told them, "No one is to leave any of it till morning," but they didn't pay attention to Moshe, and some kept the leftovers until morning. It bred worms and rotted, which made Moshe angry at them. So they gathered it morning after morning, each person according to his appetite. But as the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers per person, and all the community leaders came and reported to Moshe. He told them, "This is what Adonai had said. Tomorrow is a holy Shabbat for Adonai, or Sabbath. Bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil, and whatever is left over, set aside and keep for the morning." They set it aside till morning as Moshe had ordered, and it didn't rot or have worms. Moshe said, "Today eat that, because today is a Shabbat for Adonai. Today you won't find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the seventh day is the Shabbat. On that day there won't be any." However, on the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather and found none. Adonai said to Moshe, "How long will you refuse to observe my mitzvot and teaching, my commands? Look, Adonai has given you the Shabbat. This is why he is providing bread for 2 days on the sixth day. Each of you stay where you are. No one is to leave his place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. The people called the food man. It was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like honey cakes. Moshe said, "Here's what Adonai has ordered. Let 2 quarts of man be kept through all of your generations, so that they will be able to see the bread which I fed you in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt." Moshe said to Aaron, "Take a jar, put in it 2 quarts of man, and set it aside before Adonai to keep you through all your generations." Just as Adonai ordered Moshe, Aaron set it aside before the testimony to be kept. The people of Israel ate man for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate man until they arrived at the borders of the land of Canaan. So he told them to put one aside and put it in the ark. When Jesus comes back and the ark is found, that jar of manna will be in there. So let's see if we can make some of this make sense. So they moved to the wilderness of Sin, Seen. In Hebrew, it's a thorn. It is the root word for Sinai, like Mount Sinai. In Hebrew, Sinai is pronounced Sinai, and it means thorny. That's not, don't get caught up on those details too much, but it's good information to have. So when they arrived, it was 2 months since they had left Egypt. The complaining starts again. Their complaints were against God, like I said. God's not angry because he's going to lead Israel through lesson after lesson, because he's put them on trial. He's testing them. He's training them. Uh, I don't get upset when one of my grandchildren does something wrong. I know that my job is to teach them how to do things. And these are infants in the knowledge of God right now. So God is very patient, has a lot of grace for them. But 3 million Israelites were hungry, and God teaches them an important principle. They are to gather all the manna they needed, but only for a day. Except on the sixth day, they were to gather a double portion. So taking what you want versus what you need are two different things. And God's trying to show them that and teach them that. Verse 6 says in the NLT, the New Living Translation, it says, "So you shall know it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt." But actually, it says, "So you shall know it was Jehovah who brought you out of Egypt." God's personal name was used, and they substituted Lord. So that's one of the reasons we talk about translation so much. The issue is that the Israelites had doubts as to who it was that brought them out of Egypt. They saw Moses. They couldn't see God, or they weren't keeping their eyes on God. So Israel couldn't fully grasp that, but they also won't for many decades. Moses tells Aaron to call the entire community to come near. And then as they looked out in the desert wilderness, they saw the glory of God in the cloud. So why did Moses have to tell people to stop, look up, and come near? Because while God's presence is available to us, we must choose to come near to him. We can't just hold the Bible near us and absorb it. We have to come near to him and then look up, keep our eyes on him, stop other things, shut it all down, and pay attention to what God's trying to teach you. And if we keep our eyes on Jesus, then who is really our present day glory of God, he's who we can look to, like they were looking to the cloud. So Israel had taken their eyes off the cloud and become disheartened. Every time I get down, every time I'm starting to get whiny or complainy or whatever, it's always because I took my eyes off of God. I took my eyes off of what he wants me to pay attention to. And I'm paying attention to the past, or I'm paying attention to something made up, or something I'm not supposed to pay attention to. So we get used to the idea of Yeshua in us, Jesus the Christ. guiding us. So he goes unnoticed sometimes in our lives, but God's presence has never left Israel. And the people just quit looking on it. That's all it was. Like, there's days when I pay no attention to Jesus. He didn't go anywhere. I just didn't pay attention to him. That God's word is still here. I just didn't read it, or I didn't worship. Whatever it is, it's on me. It's not on him. He didn't move. So quail migrating across the Sinai and Arabian peninsulas at that time of the year was pretty normal. That they would rest and fill up the land after a long flight was not that uncommon. That they would do so at God's command, that's the supernatural part, and in such quantities. So at the exact spot needed, he had them show up. And that was a miracle. So the sunrise revealed an even greater miracle. Verse 13 says that the Hebrews ask, what is it? In Hebrew, what is it is manhu. So from which we have the word manna. That's where that comes from. Moses tells them it is the bread, lechem, meaning food that God has promised to send them. Taken with Numbers 11:9, that says, when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall upon it. We get a more complete picture of what was actually happening. There would be a fall of dew, then the manna, and then another layer of dew. And apparently this is what kept the manna clean and fresh. I mean, it's one thing for God to rain food from heaven for us, but for him to deliver it in a prepackaged way that protects it, only God can do that. So when the Hebrews gathered the manna, a strange thing happened. Everyone had the same amount. The Israelites learned that there was no need to hoard or to rush out or to worry if there would be enough. There'll always be enough if God provides it. So in God's economy, his bounty is endless, and equality is about giving each person what they need. So when I'm mad because somebody can play the guitar but I can't, God didn't give that to me. I don't have any reason to be disappointed or upset because he gave me what I needed. If I needed it, I would have it. So now, granted, I could take lessons and probably practice, but I wasn't born with natural talent, I guess is my point. So verse 19 brings another reminder from Egypt, Passover. The Hebrews are to gather just enough and dispose of the remainder, leaving nothing till daybreak. Well, remember that same instruction about the Passover lamb. Eat everything there and don't save anything for the next day. It's the same. So these are things God's putting the Hebrew people through to train them, to teach them. So many of the Israelites ignored that part. Shocking, huh? Human nature is, well, what if God doesn't provide? I better do something to make sure God doesn't have to provide. I can take care of myself, kind of thing. We look at God's instructions and commands all the time, and we follow the parts that make sense and we blow off the parts that don't. That is the number one argument about the Sabbath, Shabbat. It just doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't apply to us, so we're going to ignore it. So we see God's position on obedience and how blessings can be ruined by rebellion or by our determination of which of God's commands and ordinances are important and which aren't. We don't have that ability, but we do it anyway. So in verse 22, they were instructed to gather double the amount of manna. And then in verse 23, the reason is given. The seventh day is the Sabbath. It's the Shabbat. So we have the reestablishment of the Sabbath. The Sabbath had already been established at creation, and some people still got up on the Sabbath morning and went and tried to gather manna. So Moses says, now you're all on house arrest for the Sabbath. Stay where you are and do not leave your tent. So think about this. They're slaves, and God gives them a mandatory day off. That was opposite of what their life was before. Like, you're supposed to stop working one day a week on the seventh day. So while the Sabbath is important to God, clearly it's a very thin or thorny issue for Christians. Christians get mad at me all the time, especially real seasoned church people, because they say this doesn't apply to us. And the reason they give for it not applying to us is Jesus did away with that. That was Old Testament for Israel and the Hebrews, but not for us. Jesus did away with that. But Then we have the Sermon on the Mount where he says he didn't do that. But we still go there. And we'll get to why here in just a second. So, nowhere in the Bible has God rescinded the command of the Sabbath. I've been looking for it for years. I can't find it. Nowhere in the Bible does it say for that generation or since Christ it's okay to ignore the Sabbath. None of that's in there. If you find it, please leave a comment, send me a message. I want to know. But like I said, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says he didn't do any of that. Or as many Bibles say, the law and the prophets. But really what he said was he didn't abolish the Torah. It's all still there. So it is a fact that the early church followed the biblical rule of the Sabbath until Emperor Constantine comes along and he ordered the Sabbath abolished. He didn't change it. He didn't move it to Sunday. He abolished it. And he replaced it with something called the Lord's Day, which became the new day for Gentile worship. There is so much there, there's no way I can contain it all in this video. So we're going to stop there and just know we're going to talk about Constantine in the second half of chapter 16 next time. So don't forget, love God, love people, and change the world.